The United States government was a small government during the 19th century. With the dramatic exception of the Civil War and the Reconstruction, the federal government had a minimal administrative structure and a small policy footprint before the 1890s. Although in the early 1890s, the government grew steadily, and by the World War I, we had a proper income tax, massive spending, and our outlay grew about 80 times larger. Furthermore, new branches of the government were put into place between World War I and World War II, mostly from Prohibition and the Great Depression. And in World War II, we had a mandatory draft, which wasn't necessarily the most constitutional thing. In that time, our national debt went from $2.4 billion in the late 1800s all the way to $43 billion by the time World War II was properly underway. This may not seem like a lot in our minds because of large inflation since then, but to give you an idea of how much that was back then, 4 cents was worth one of our dollars. It's weird to think that pennies were worth quarters right now. Why was inflation so drastic during this time? Well, this was after they reinstated the greenbacks as viable currency. This marked the beginning of the death of the gold standard system, and was finally killed during this time period. This also was during the time period of the industrial and progressive eras, and although drastically different in how they viewed the general public, they were both expensive agendas, one focusing on progressing industrial progress, and the other focusing on quality of life for every citizen, until it got to an extreme with abortion and prohibition. These policies of both quality of life improvements and industrial progress implementations were quite expensive, giving reasons why the debt skyrocketed as much as it did. These agendas ended when the Great Depression hit, although some speculate the New Deal during the Great Depression only helped the first year of its implementation. Afterward, it just prolonged the Great Depression. Now, this isn't quite on topic, but during this time our population grew immensely, and the House of Representatives skyrocketed in numbers. And this raises a good question. Did we theoretically outgrow our representative outcrop during this time period? I'm not sure. I haven't lived long enough to make an opinion on that. But it's a good question nonetheless. Anyways, we had essentially become a Leviathan by World War II, which was commonly defined by the book that Thomas Hobbes had written nearly 300 years before, which describes Leviathan as a large societal controlling government that everyone gives their rights to evenly distribute back to the public. Sound familiar? Yes. This was proto-socialism. Mandatory draft, outlawing of alcohol, equal health care, mandatory public schooling, and the income tax are pretty good examples of this. Is it funny that 3 of these happened during this time period? Coincidence? If you like this dialogue type of video, please respond to this. I don't know how to end this very well, so just comment down below if you like this. Goodbye.